She came off the train with a cane in one hand, a letter in the other, and the kind of hope only the forgotten still carry. He looked at her once, saw the limp, and turned away. Just like that. No hello, no kindness. But the thing is, Mabel Ellis didn't come all this way just to be chosen. She came to build something no man could take from her. And by the end of this story, the whole town would remember her not as the girl he left, but as the woman who stayed. The wind hit hard when she stepped off the train. It came down from the hills like a warning. Dry, bitter, sharp. Mabel Ellis gripped the iron railing with one gloved hand and her cane with the other, steadying herself before lifting her left foot down onto the wooden platform. The limp showed right away. It always did. No matter how long her skirt hung, no matter how carefully she stepped, that slight drag of her boot always betrayed her. She had worn her best. A plum-colored traveling dress, brass buttons polished, a velvet ribbon in her hair that her sister had once called optimistic. The cane was carved hickory, smoothed down with age and determination. Its handle was scuffed from years of use, from train stations just like this one. This was supposed to be the end of the road, and the beginning of something new. Mabel looked around. There was no name sign, no man waiting with a hat in his hand or flowers like in the stories. Just a group of boys loitering near the crates, a few townsfolk collecting parcels, and a man selling biscuits from a cart that steamed in the cold. She stood still for a moment, hoping. Then she saw him, off to the left, standing near a lamppost, tall, square-jawed, wrapped in a long brown coat. The photo she'd been sent didn't do him justice. He looked stronger in person, maybe a little older too, but the same eyes. His name was Caleb Rowe. She took a deep breath and began walking toward him, each step tapping the platform once with her cane. Steady, deliberate. The ache in her thigh burned from the train ride, but she didn't show it. She never did. He watched her the whole way, his face unreadable, his arms crossed. "Mr. Rowe?" she asked when she reached him. He looked down, past her face to her cane, then her left foot. She could see it, the shift in his eyes, the way his jaw clenched just slightly. "I thought it would be less noticeable," he muttered. Her heart dropped, but her voice stayed level. "I told you I walked with a limp. You didn't say it was that bad." "It's not," she said quietly. "Not unless someone makes it worse." He glanced around, then back at her, eyes colder now. "I need a wife who can help work a ranch, not someone I have to help out of bed every morning." "I didn't ask to be carried," she replied. "No, but you'll need more help than I gotta give." And with that, he turned. He tipped his hat, not out of respect but routine, and walked away down the boardwalk, leaving her standing there with the letter he'd written still warm in her glove. She didn't cry. Not there. Not yet. She simply turned, as if she were just another traveler looking for a place to wait. The train pulled away behind her, leaving steam and silence. The wind picked up again. She found a bench under the overhang of the station and sat, slowly, carefully. The platform began to empty. The sun crawled higher, casting pale gold light across the empty road. A pair of boys snickered as they passed. "Guess she wasn't what he wanted," one whispered. Mabel looked out across the horizon, her face calm. Inside, her chest was burning. She had come all the way from Kentucky, paid for her own ticket, bought the dress herself. That letter from Caleb had been kind, gentle even. "I don't need a perfect woman," he had written. "Just someone with good sense and a warm heart." But maybe a limp had made her imperfect after all. By mid-morning, she was the only one left on the platform. No plan, no next step. She'd spent nearly everything getting here. Then came the voice. "You waiting on someone, sweetheart?" Mabel looked up. A woman stood nearby, wrapped in a thick shawl, flour dust on her sleeves and a wire basket in her hand. Her hair was tucked under a bonnet, and her face was lined with years, but her eyes were kind. "No," Mabel said. "Not anymore." The woman nodded once. "I figured." Man walked off about an hour ago with a scowl and a broken promise hanging off his shoulders. Mabel didn't answer. "You got a place to stay?" She shook her head. "You bake?" "I can." "Well then," the woman said, "you're coming with me." Mabel hesitated. "I don't have money. I don't need money, the woman replied. I need good bread and someone who doesn't whine about aching knees. She extended her hand. My name's Ada Klein. I keep the boarding house. Got a spare room since my daughter married and moved east? Mabel stood slowly. Mabel Ellis. Ada gave a small approving nod. That'll do. They walked slowly down the main road, Mabel's limp clicking steadily against the boards. The town wasn't large, maybe 24 buildings, a general store, a livery, a chapel, and a schoolhouse she could see in the distance. People watched them pass. A woman whispered behind her palm. A man paused with his horse halfway into the hitching rail. She's the one who got left, someone said. Mabel kept walking. The boarding house was simple but clean. Ada led her through a narrow hallway to a small back room with a single bed, a wooden trunk, and a curtain instead of a door. There's water in the basin. Supper's at 6. You want to stay? You work. I don't care about your limp. Just don't burn the biscuits. Mabel turned to her, eyes sharp with held-back emotion. Why are you helping me? Ada shrugged. Because I've been left too, and because you didn't sit there crying. You stood up and walked away. That counts for something. That night, Mabel washed her face in the basin, took off her shoes, and laid the letter from Caleb Rowe flat across her chest. She stared at the ceiling for a long time, her fingers tracing the faded ink. She didn't cry, but the ache in her leg was nothing compared to the one in her heart. Tomorrow she would sweep the porch, bake the bread, keep her head down. But tonight, she let the silence hold her. Not as a victim, as a woman who had been rejected but not broken. By the end of her first week in Dry Creek, everyone knew her name, though few ever said it out loud. To most, she was simply that girl with the limp or the one he turned away from at the depot. The town didn't need much to start whispering. It fed on glances, unfinished sentences, the way someone's hand lingered too long on a doorknob before walking away. But Mabel Ellis never flinched. Each morning, she rose before the rooster's call, kneaded dough with her sleeves rolled up and her hair braided tight. She swept the porch of Ada Klein's boarding house until the floorboards shone, carried kindling with a limp so steady it became part of the rhythm of the place. She didn't explain herself. She didn't apologize. When the butcher's wife sniffed and said, "Brides ought to be able to ride, not hobble," Mabel simply looked her in the eye and said, "Well then, it's a good thing I'm not riding after your husband." Ada laughed for a whole hour after that. So did the blacksmith. But the comments kept coming, soft and cutting, like sand in a wound. "She'll be gone by winter," someone muttered outside the general store. "Girls like that don't stick. I heard she begged the man to take her anyway." "Would you take her?" "I wouldn't even take her bread." Still, Mabel kept baking. Still, she kept walking. One day, she stitched a torn hem for the preacher's wife without being asked. Another, she held a crying child on the boardwalk until his mother returned. When Mrs. Braddock's horse spooked and threw a shoe, it was Mabel who fetched help, despite her leg dragging through the mud like an anchor. None of it changed the whispers, but it did start something else: curiosity. A young boy named Tom began watching her from the bakery window each morning as she brushed flour from her apron and adjusted her cane. A teenage girl asked her quietly if it hurt, walking like that. Mabel said, "Not always, and never more than being stared at." That earned a smile. She didn't expect kindness. But when it came in small things. A jar of blackberry jam left on the stoop. Fresh eggs tucked in a basket. A spool of deep blue thread that no one claimed. They never said thank you, but someone had started to notice. It was the third Friday in town when she met him. The day was wet and gray, the kind that made her thigh burn like fire under her skirts. Mabel walked slower that day, each step planted with extra care as she carried a wrapped loaf to the chapel. She didn't see the man until she turned the corner and nearly collided with him. He was tall, taller than most, and wore a wool coat still damp from the rain. His hair was dark, streaked with early gray, and his eyes, well, they weren't kind exactly, but they weren't cruel either. They were quiet. He stepped back quickly. "My fault," he said, voice low and warm. "I wasn't looking." Mabel nodded once. "No harm done." His eyes dropped to her cane, then rose again to her face. Not judgmental, just noticing. "You from here?" he asked. No, she said. Just staying a while. Smart, he replied. Passing through is safer. She raised a brow. Is that what you're doing? He hesitated. Number, I've got a ranch north of town. Quiet place. She shifted the bread to her other hand. And you come into town to walk into strangers? That brought a hint of a smile. Usually just for salt and nail, he said. But sometimes I find something better. Mabel didn't blush. She didn't smile either. She just said, What's your name? Silas Boone. She'd heard the name, a widower, reclusive, said little, worked hard, paid his debts, owned a stretch of rough land out near Bitter Ridge that no one else had bothered to fence. Well, Mr. Boone, she said, adjusting her weight to ease the strain in her leg, maybe next time try not to knock a woman clean off her feet. I'll aim for less dramatic introductions, he said. She turned to go. He hesitated. You bake? She glanced back. Every day. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small tin. These need help. Burnt the bottoms. She opened it. The biscuits were hard enough to be thrown as weapons. Mabel looked up. How do you even chew these? He shrugged. Mostly I don't. She considered a moment, then said, Bring me flour, and I'll trade you something edible. He tipped his hat. Deal. That evening, back in her room, she stood at the wash basin and stared at her reflection. Her cheeks were pink from the cold. Her braid had unraveled slightly, and in her hand, she held the same tin, now empty. He hadn't said much, but he hadn't looked away either, and that in Dry Creek was saying everything. The next morning, before the frost had even melted off the porch railing, Silas Boone returned. He didn't knock. He just stood at the edge of the boarding house stoop, holding a sack of flour in one hand and a bundle of firewood under the other. Ada Klein opened the door in her housecoat, raised a skeptical brow and called over her shoulder, Mabel, you've got company. Tall, quiet, and polite. My least favorite combination. Mabel wiped her hands on her apron and stepped into the hall, heart thudding for reasons she didn't want to name. Silas gave her a nod. Morning. She nodded back. That's a lot of flour. You said you bake every day. I do. Figured I'd give you something to bake with. Trade still stand? Mabel glanced at Ada, who had already disappeared back into the kitchen, but was very much listening from around the corner. It does, Mabel said. She took the sack, surprised by the weight of it, then the firewood bundle. I didn't ask for that. I know, Silas said. But I heard the porch stove eats it like candy. She couldn't argue. I'll have your biscuits by noon. He started to turn, then paused. I'll be at the livery. Mule through a shoe again. Seems we've got more in common than I thought. Mabel let out a short breath. Your mule limps too? Only on Mondays. She almost smiled. Almost. By midday, Mabel had baked a fresh tin of honey biscuits, the tops golden and soft, the bottoms barely kissed by heat. She wrapped them in cloth and carried them herself, her cane tapping softly on the boardwalk as she made her way through town. People noticed. They always did. But this time, the glances lingered not with mockery, but curiosity. When she stepped into the livery, Silas was brushing down a muddy-coated mule with one hand and arguing with the blacksmith's apprentice about shoes that didn't fit. He stopped when he saw her. You came yourself. I walked just fine, she said, even with a cane. I never said you didn't. She handed him the bundle. He opened it and looked down at the biscuits like they were something rare. Smells like something I don't deserve, he said. No one deserves biscuits, she said dryly. They're a kindness, not a judgment. He laughed softly. Fair enough. She turned to go, but before she reached the door, he asked, You ever worked on a ranch? She stopped. Number, I was raised over a mercantile. I know thread and bread, not fences and cattle. Silas adjusted the mule's halter and said, That's a shame. I need hands, and I've got more chores than I can finish before nightfall. I'm not looking for work. Didn't say I was offering pay. She faced him. Then what are you offering? Time, he said. Quiet, maybe company. I've got a bunkhouse that doesn't get used anymore. Stove works, roof doesn't leak. Mabel narrowed her eyes. You offering me a job or a pity cot? Neither, he said. I'm offering you a place where no one calls you the one he left at the depot. That made her still. I'll think on it, she said finally. Good, he replied. I'm there either way. That evening, Mabel didn't sleep. She sat at the little table in her room with the fire down to embers and the soft shuffle of Ada's footsteps in the other room. The tin Silas had brought sat empty beside her, now washed and gleaming. She didn't understand what he wanted. Not fully, not yet. But she understood this. He hadn't looked at her limp like a failing. He hadn't spoken slowly to her like she was delicate, or asked about her past like he needed reasons to be kind. He'd just seen her, and that was the rarest thing of all. 2 days later, she went out to his ranch. Not to stay, not yet, just to see. The land wasn't much. Scrub hills, a windmill that creaked like it had arthritis, a small barn with missing shingles. But it was clean, ordered, lived in. Silas met her at the gate with a small nod. He didn't ask why she came. He just walked beside her as she looked. The bunkhouse was simple. One room, a stove in the corner, a cot, a shelf, a chair that rocked gently with the breeze. Mabel touched the frame of the window, ran her fingers over the sill. You live alone? She asked. I do. Why me? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, because you don't ask for things, and because you don't scare easy. She nodded once, then turned to him. I'll cook dinner. He didn't smile, but his eyes warmed. I'll chop wood. And just like that, something unspoken passed between them. Something simple, something steady, something enough. It didn't take long for the town to notice she'd gone out to Silas Boone's ranch. People in Dry Creek noticed everything, how long your curtain stayed drawn, who you talked to at the mercantile, whether your boots tracked in more mud than usual. So when Mabel Ellis returned from the ridge with wood smoke in her scarf and the faintest hint of pine on her skirt, the town took note. They didn't ask her directly. They never would. But the questions came sideways. Did you find a new place to bake? Said the preacher's wife with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. A long way to go for firewood, muttered the blacksmith's daughter. Hope you're not limping worse now, said the woman who ran the dry goods store. Mabel didn't flinch. She never did. She just looked them each in the eye, offered a loaf, a stitch, a nod, and kept walking. Ada, to her credit, didn't ask at all. She just left extra coffee warming on the stove and made sure the porch light stayed lit past dusk. That week, Mabel split her time between town and the ridge. She helped Silas boil leather straps, re-wax harnesses, and bake biscuits that didn't break teeth. In turn, he taught her how to repair hinges, how to check a fence line, how to hold a nail with just enough tension to keep the wood from splitting. They didn't speak about much, but they worked in rhythm, the kind that doesn't need filling. And in the quiet, Mabel found something strange blooming inside her. Not comfort, not yet, but ease. The kind of ease that only comes when no one expects you to explain why you move the way you do. But silence doesn't last forever in a town like Dry Creek. And one afternoon, it cracked. She was in the bakery delivering rolls to a mother with 3 wild boys and a face like worn linen when she heard it. 2 women near the front, low voices sharper than knives. I heard she came out of some institution. Is that so? Her leg wasn't the only thing wrong with her. Ran away from her family. Heard her daddy drank. Heard she tried to run and got thrown from a wagon. No wonder he walked away at the station. Mabel's hands froze over the bread basket. The mother caught her eye, lips parting as if to apologize. But no words came. Mabel didn't speak. She set the rolls down, turned, and walked out the door. Her limp was heavier than usual. She didn't cry. But by the time she reached the ridge, her face was drawn tight as wire. Silas was by the woodpile, stacking kindling with calm precision. He looked up when he heard her steps, recognized the tension instantly. What happened, as he asked. She didn't answer. Just walked past him and into the kitchen. He followed. Inside, she set her basket down, took off her coat, and began tying her apron with stiff fingers. I want to cook, she said. Mabel, I said I want to cook. He let it be. For a while, the only sounds were the chopping of carrots, the rattle of a pot, the hiss of heat under the kettle. Silas sat at the table, watching her move with a ferocity he hadn't seen before. Finally, she said it. They think they know me. He waited. They talk like I'm broken, like I'm less than, like what happened to me is who I am. Silas leaned forward. And is it? She met his eyes. No. Then cook, he said. Let 'em talk. She turned back to the stove, lips pressed tight, but her hands steadied. Dinner was stew and bread and silence that healed more than it hurt. After they ate, Silas didn't ask again, but before she left, he stopped her at the door. You don't owe me your story, he said, but I'll hear it when you're ready. She hesitated, then reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a small folded paper, creased, worn, handled too many times. It was a letter, the one she'd written to herself on the train. She didn't hand it to him, just said, one day, and walked into the night. The next morning, the two women who whispered in the bakery found warm loaves on their porch steps. No note, no explanation. But when they bit into the crust, they cried. Not out of guilt, out of recognition. Because sometimes a woman fights cruelty not with fire, but with bread. And sometimes the taste of grace is what silences a town louder than any scream ever could. The ridge was quiet that morning, too quiet for early spring. Mabel had just finished sweeping the porch when she saw Silas ride up from the west trail. He wasn't moving like usual. His shoulders were set stiff, his hat low. When he dismounted, he didn't look at her, just handed her a small bundle of twine-wrapped paper. Mule stepped wrong, he said. Need to reset the shoe, I'll be back. She caught the faint tremble in his voice. Silas, she called gently, but he was already turning back, boot heels crunching across the frostbitten earth. She looked down at the bundle, a thick letter, official looking. No return address, just his name, penned sharp and black. She didn't open it, but she laid it carefully on the table and waited. By dusk, he returned. He found her kneading dough with her sleeves rolled high and her braid loose down her back. She didn't look up. It's still on the table. He stepped inside slowly. It's from my brother, he said after a moment. We don't write, haven't in years. She nodded. Then maybe it's time. Silas sat down across from her. The lamplight cast warm gold across the room. He turned the letter over once, twice, then opened it. The room held its breath. She didn't speak, just listened. When he finished reading, he set the pages down, folded his hands and stared at nothing. He wants to sell the rest of the land, he said flatly. Says it's a waste. Wants me to sign off and move east. Says I've done enough pretending. Mabel looked up then. Pretending? Silas nodded. That I'm not just waiting for something to end. There was a long pause, then she asked, Are you? He looked at her, and for the first time since she met him, his eyes showed something raw. Not pain exactly, not fear, shame. I used to be married, he said. Did I tell you that? She nodded. Whispers said so. She was sick, he continued. Long time, couldn't fix it. Doctors said it was just a matter of waiting. He paused. I built this place for her. Every beam, every wall. Thought if I made it strong enough, she'd last longer. She didn't. Mabel swallowed. Her fingers had gone still in the dough. I let it rot after, he said. Didn't care if it burned. The bunkhouse, the fences. None of it meant anything. He looked at her then. Then you showed up. Limp and all. She raised a brow. And I saw someone who walked different but never bent. Someone who didn't need fixing. Just space. Her voice was soft. You gave me that space. You filled it, he said. And now I don't want to run. But I don't know how to stay either. Mabel reached for a cloth and wiped her hands slowly. Then she walked around the table and sat beside him, their shoulders close but not touching. My father was a hard man, she said. Didn't believe in weakness. When my leg broke after I fell from the cart, he said it was God's punishment for not minding him. Silas turned to her, but she kept speaking. He made me walk without the cane. Said it was a crutch for cowards. I walked until I collapsed. For years I believed I was broken. She looked up. I'm not. Silas's jaw tensed. I'm not waiting for someone to carry me, she said. But I won't let anyone run from me either. You stay, Silas Boone. You stay and choose something that doesn't come with pain. He exhaled, the breath heavy like dust leaving his chest. I'd like to. She nodded once. Then do. That night, the letter from his brother burned in the stove, and as the paper curled into ash, Mabel Ellis tucked herself into a cot lined with quilts she'd stitched by hand, beside a window that creaked when the wind hit just right, and whispered, not a prayer, but a vow. This place will not lose another good man to ghosts. The next morning, they worked side by side. Mabel mended fence wire while Silas repaired the old rain barrel near the porch. When she paused to stretch her leg, he handed her a flask of water without asking. When he grunted in pain from lifting too fast, she placed a hand on his back, not to soothe, but to steady. They didn't speak of love, but it was there, thick and honest between them. Like the air before a summer storm, undeniable. It started with a knock, not the polite kind, the kind that says, we already know what we want, and we're not here to ask. Mabel was pulling bread from the oven when the sound echoed through the ridge. She glanced toward the window, already knowing something had shifted. The air had changed, still warm, but heavier, like a storm rolling in beneath the calm. Silas opened the door. Two men stood outside, clean coats, sharp boots. One carried a satchel, the other a ledger. Neither smiled. We're here on behalf of Mr. Samuel Boone, the one with the ledger said. We've come to settle matters regarding the sale of this land. Silas didn't answer right away. Mabel stepped up beside him, flowers still on her hands, apron tied snug around her waist. Sale? She asked. Mr. Boone's brother has initiated proceedings, the man continued, reading from his notes. He believes the land is wasted, unprofitable. Sent us to finalize the signature. We understand the elder Boone's health is in question. Silas didn't flinch. My health's fine. Then we'll make this quick. The man with the satchel pulled out papers, already folded at the edge, as if presuming the deal had been made long ago. We brought the ink, he said. All that's missing is your name. Mabel turned to Silas. Do you want to sell? His jaw flexed. I told my brother no. And yet, she murmured, they're here. The silence thickened. Then Mabel stepped forward. She took the papers, turned, walked to the porch rail, and tore them clean down the middle. The wind took one half. She handed the other back. You can ride back down the ridge, she said, voice cool as spring water. There's nothing for you here. The men blinked. Miss, I'm not miss, and I'm not yours to question, she snapped. I walked across 4 states to get here, limp and all, and this land is the first place no one asked me to shrink. Silas stepped beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't need to, but his voice was like steel. Tell my brother I buried my name the day he stopped being family. This land's not for sale. The men exchanged glances. This will go on record, one said. Then let it. They rode off, not with anger, but with confusion, as if they'd arrived expecting dust and defeat, and instead found something planted so deep, no shovel could touch it. Word spread faster than wildfire. By the next morning, the whole of Dry Creek knew what had happened. The whispers came again, but different this time. Not cruel, curious. They turned them down? He stood beside her. I heard she tore up legal documents with her bare hands. Mabel smiled at that one. At the bakery, Mrs. Kettle asked if she'd still be selling bread that Sunday. Mabel said, I'll bring double. At the general store, the blacksmith's daughter pressed a wrapped bundle into her hand. Inside was a ribbon, deep plum, just like the one Mabel wore on the train so many weeks ago. For your hair, the girl whispered. It looked nice. Mabel walked home that evening lighter than she had in years. Her limp didn't change, but how people looked at it had, and maybe that was enough. A week later, the town gathered for the harvest social. It was tradition, music, cider, a bonfire, and enough food to feed 10 counties. Mabel almost didn't go. She still remembered the last time, standing on the edge of the square, the girl left behind. But when Silas appeared on the porch in a clean shirt, holding out his arm without a word, she took it. They arrived at dusk. No one turned away. The music softened when they stepped onto the dance platform. No one asked. No one questioned. And when he offered his hand, Mabel placed hers in it like it belonged there all along. "I can't keep pace," she whispered. "Then we'll set our own." He didn't guide her. He moved with her. And in that moment, surrounded by candles and fiddles and warm bread and Kinder eyes, Mabel Ellis became more than the bride with the limp. She became the woman who stood her ground, the one who stitched, who baked, who stayed, the one who wasn't just chosen, but chose. And Silas Boone, once silent, once broken, smiled wider than he had in years. Not because she saved him, but because she let him save himself. Not every wound shows on the outside, and not every limp comes from the leg. Some of us walk slower through life, not because our steps are broken, but because we've carried too much for too long. What Mabel Ellis showed us, what she carved into the dust of that little town with each uneven footfall, is that dignity doesn't ask permission. It just shows up, quietly, steadily, and then it builds something that cannot be torn down. She didn't beg for a place, she created one, with her hands, with flower and thread and silence. She didn't retaliate with cruelty when the town whispered behind her back. She answered with bread, with care, with presence. She stood where she was not wanted until they had to see her, until they realized the strength in the woman they tried to overlook. And Silas Boone, he didn't save her. He didn't swoop in and fix what the world had broken. He did something rarer. He stood beside her, matched her stride, matched her silence, matched her ache with one of his own. And in a world where so many love only what shines, he chose what endures. Because that's what love should be. Not loud, not perfect, but real and steady and earned. And maybe that's why we told this story. Because there's someone out there right now who thinks they have to fix themselves to be worthy. Someone who was told their limp, literal or otherwise, makes them less. Someone who's been left at too many stations, watched too many backs walk away. And to you we say this: you don't need to walk straight to stand tall. You don't need to be chosen to be whole. You are not the sum of what others could not carry. So if this story moved you, even just a little, leave a comment below. Tell us what you saw in Mabel. Tell us if you've ever been her, or if you've ever loved someone like Silas. Quiet and wounded and strong in all the places no one applauds. Because your story might be the one someone else needs to read today. And if you'd like to see where Mabel and Silas go from here, if they build that bakery she dreamed of, if the town truly changes, or if another test comes riding over the ridge, let us know below. Because here on this channel, we don't just tell stories, we build something that lasts together.